Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the very first ever Franklin Local Board webinar. It's a new experience for all of us, and so hopefully it'll just truck along beautifully. But great to have people here and registered. What we're going to do firstly is want to go through and have everyone that's going to be participating in the session this evening and presenting to you to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get started. So we're going to start with the people who are here in the room with me tonight, and so Amanda Kinzert.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Kinzert, and I'm one of the 4 representatives of the Pukekohe subdivision on the Franklin Local Board.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Logan Soole tōku ingoa. My name is Logan Soole, and I'm another one of the 4 representatives on the Franklin Local Board. In the Pukekohe subdivision of the Franklin Local Board.
Now we'll head off to those out there who are doing this from home and utilising technology. We'll start out west with Sharlene.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Sharlene Druyen, and I'm the Waiuku representative for the Franklin Local Board.
And Matt.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Matthew Murphy. I'm a member of the Franklin Local Board and the other Waiuku Ward representative.
Alan Cole.
Good evening. Yeah, Alan Cole, Pukekohe subdivision. Yeah, one of the 4 representatives.
And Angela.
Hi everyone, my name's Angela Fuljames and I'm on the Wairoa subdivision, and I'm looking forward to hearing your views, and I'm really hoping that you will read the plan and you will ask lots of other people to read it and submit as well. Thanks.
And last but not least, Lance.
Hi, my name's Lance Gedge. I'm one of the 3 representatives from the Wairoa subdivision on the Franklin Local Board. Good to be here, and yes, as Angela says, it'll be fantastic to hear your views. Cheers.
Thank you, team. And so the format this evening, folks, is that board members will introduce our 6 outcomes that we have in our draft local board plan and talk about the priorities and impacts of those and the initiatives that we want to achieve. Those listening in, you can use your message bar to type in questions, and one of our staff members will be observing and passing on to us those questions. Look, we're not going to be able to answer every question tonight, and we really do want to focus on our local board plan and those outcomes and hear from you what you think of our outcomes. So we won't be avoiding any questions either. So if you've got questions that may not relate directly to the local board plan, we will come back to you. But don't be offended if you don't get a response to them. We will not hide from them, and we'll come back to you in due course. Look, if you want to discuss other council related issues like water rates or speed limits in more depth, we can do that at another time. They don't make up much of our local board plan. A recording of this webinar will be available on the website a bit later on. It is really, really important that we get your thoughts, whether you agree, disagree, or partially agree with what our draft plan says. Positive feedback is equally as important as negative, but normally people giving feedback are those who disagree, so any feedback is valuable. We want to be as efficient as we can tonight, so I'll get our board members to introduce themselves again when they come through. Remember, there are a number of ways you can submit your feedback so as to provide that info. And we'll kick off now with our presentation and introduce our Senior Advisor, Georgina Gilmore.
Thank you, Andy. We'll start, please, Denise. So you'll just hear me as I'm presenting, moving on the slides through by saying thank you next, Denise. So if you hear that, that's what that's about. Okay, first slide. The first thing is just to introduce really what a local board plan is, because it's quite an unusual thing that's quite specific to Auckland. Next slide, Denise. So the purpose of a local board plan. Local boards were set up during Auckland local government amalgamation to protect and advance the local voice. As part of that legislation, it required local elected members to engage with their communities to understand and represent their local preferences and priorities. The local board plan gives local elected representatives, and that's the local board in this instance, direction and mandate on what and how they'll deliver over a 3-year term. So how do local boards work in action? This is the mandated focus for the local board activity over the next 3 years, so starting in financial year 22, so 1st of July next year. It's used by the governing body, that's the ward councillors, to plan for the 10-year budget, that's the long-term plan. So what's on the local board plan does inform how they allocate budget in the next 10 years. It's used by council staff, including CCOs, to design annual work programs. Now that's the annual to-do list. It's what the specific initiatives are to deliver on the plan. It's also used by mana whenua and other local boards to identify shared objectives and to identify partnership opportunities. It's also used by community groups to identify partnership opportunities, for example, in local grants. So local grants that are really closely aligned to the local board plan are likely to be more successful in achieving what they're applying for. So some of the challenges that were considered in developing the draft local board plan were the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we know that there's going to be limited money to deliver on opportunity. Climate change is a huge theme, both at a regional and national level, and certainly we see those effects in terms of drought, storms and floods across the Franklin Local Board area. The Franklin Local Board area is huge, and there are diverse communities within with really differing but equally valid priorities, and that's a challenge when it comes to allocating resource. The Franklin Local Board area has twin coastlines, both in the Manukau Harbour and the Haureki Gulf, and an expansive roading network. We have kilometres after kilometres of roads, far more in terms of distance than other local boards. We also have local needs from accelerated housing development in the area. That means that there's demands for infrastructure, employment opportunities, and demand on existing community facilities as well as for new community facilities. We also have a challenge in the distance from regional facilities and regionally funded facilities and services. On top of that, we have fairly unreliable digital connectivity that might otherwise allow our communities to access services. So what are the opportunities? It's not all bad news. There is renewed interest in promoting domestic tourism, which is great news for the Franklin Local Board area. There's renewed interest in environment and preparing for the effects of climate change, and that's reflected in Auckland's Climate Action Plan, but also in national investment opportunities. There's accelerated interest amongst our communities and in the business world in working from home, meaning that people of high incomes can live in remote areas like never before, and people can use free time from not commuting to engage in community life rather than sitting on the motorway. There's national interest in resourcing pest management, and we've seen that through the COVID response and in initiatives like Pest Free New Zealand. And there's accelerated investment in transport infrastructure, again accelerated by the COVID response, and that's evidenced in the New Zealand upgrade projects that are being rolled out at the moment. So what has informed the development of this draft? So we have the challenges and opportunities we've just talked about that have been brought to the board by public and by staff over the last 3 years, or the last 10 years really, of the local board. There's been engagement with Franklin communities through January and February 2020, where there was a consultation round that took place at that time. There's also issues that have been raised in previous terms through previous consultations with the community, both formal and informal. And there's, of course, the issues experienced by the board members as residents of Franklin and as elected representatives. The availability and alignment with sources of resource has also informed some of the initiatives in this plan. Plan goals that we've come up with for this draft plan reflect quite closely the Auckland plan goals, and that's quite purposeful. So close alignment with Auckland plan goals means that we are closely aligned to funding sources and resources allocated by the governing body to deliver on the Auckland plan. So today we're talking primarily about the 6 outcomes, but just as a bit of context, and you'll see this if you read the full plan, that each outcome is underpinned by 3 or 4 objectives, and each objective is supported by some suggested initiatives. Once endorsed, subject matter staff are asked to provide options for delivering on those initiatives, so more specific sort of actions through an annual work program. So you may not see the detail in this plan around specific tactics. It's more of a high-level strategic document. Just for context, the annual work programs respond to these work programs, but also reflect the available resource in that financial year. Progress on annual work programs, and therefore the local board plan, is reported quarterly and publicly at business meetings. Now I'll now pass to Matt Murphy just to talk a little bit about how we prioritise, or how we're asking you to feed into prioritising the outcomes this year.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Matthew Murphy, and I have the privilege of kicking things off by talking very briefly about the need for us to prioritise the what, when and how we do things. COVID-19 has thrown the world into an absolute tailspin, and whilst here in New Zealand we are seemingly heading back to what some would describe as the new norm, it has affected this plan, and Angela will talk about that later. Our initial goals, objectives and initiatives were developed prior to the onset of COVID-19. These had been developed through what we had learnt over the years as traditionally been important to our Franklin communities. We are confident that they are still important, but due to the financial impacts on council, like other businesses, we now have to think more carefully about what the absolute priorities are, so we know what we can focus our reduced budgets on. That is why sessions like this are incredibly important, so we know within our 6 outcomes what exactly are the priorities and how we spend the harder to find money, and also what issues we should put to the top of our advocacy list when pushing for things with those other decision makers. So please help us out. Let us know what are the most important priorities within those outcomes and initiatives contained within the local draft. And like Andy said, if you like saying, say so. Same if you don't, or you have an alternative idea. Thanks for your time. Now back to Andy.
Thank you, Matt. And just for those, you might see Matt disappear a little bit later off the screen. He's got a fairly important community organisation meeting that he does have to slip out to, so you may see him disappear later on. Okay, so now we'll kick off with Amanda to talk about our first outcome.
Thank you, and I'm going to talk about, as Andy said, our outcome: use our strengths to generate local opportunity and prosperity. Franklin is, as we showed, is coast to coast, and it's challenged with poor transport options, unreliable internet connectivity, and this can prevent us from attracting and sustaining new businesses and remote workers. As Georgina said, working from home can be very frustrating when you have slow internet. This makes us vulnerable to not being able to take advantage of changes in work environment that are happening due to COVID. However, I also think it highlights our strength in our communities and our people. Our challenges, as mentioned, include how can we attract new industries and employers. Unreliable and slow broadband and Wi-Fi connections. competing demands for expensive but critical water and transport infrastructure, access to Auckland Council's-led economic development interventions, and national provincial development funding. However, we also have some amazing natural resources and talented people living in the Franklin Local Board area, and some opportunities that can be leveraged. Pukekohe area has elite soils with a strong horticultural industry. We have natural environments that attract and have a huge potential to attract more local and domestic visitors. And when able, international visitors. Our film industry is an industry we need to work with more, and one that could bring wider recognition of our natural resources we offer. We're close to both Auckland and the Waikato growth areas. This is an opportunity coming with better connectivity to the city through the rail to Pukekohe and the ferry services to Beachlands. The Franklin Local Board goal is to support our people to create and access employment, advocate for regional and national investment in infrastructure, support and invest in initiatives that develop, leverage from and promote our local strengths as we anticipate changes to our economy, environment and people. We've all felt the effects of COVID. So a focus on supporting local economic development initiatives as we move forward is important to me and this board. This includes supporting our rangatahi, our youth, to develop capabilities for employment opportunities within our community. There is more detail in the full plan. Have a look at the plan and submit your thoughts. It's important to have a vision. We are asking for your feedback and any ideas on how the local board can support recovery. The more feedback we get, the better. Have your say, aucklandhaveyoursay.co.nz/lovelocal. I will now invite Malcolm to address outcome 2, transport.
Thanks very much, Amanda. Obviously, my name is Malcolm Bell. Good evening again. I'm talking to you this evening about transport options. Now, transport, as I'm sure you all know, is absolutely a huge issue, particularly throughout the whole of the Franklin area. In addition to that, we're expected to see an increase in population of something like 120,000 people in the next 30 years or so, and we really need to be planning for those people arriving. Lots of our small communities like Clevedon, for instance, are going to see a 600% growth over the next 10 years. And that includes many of our much smaller communities like Clark's Beach, Glenbrook and Beachlands Maraetai. To say the least of it, our roading network is really not fit for purpose in many areas. I spend quite a lot of time talking to Wendy Spiller, our local police commander on the coast, and she believes that the Whitford Maraetai Road is probably the most dangerous road on her patch, and she absolutely hates it, and I can quite understand why. We also have a huge number of quarries in the area who commit a vast amount of traffic, which clearly, along with forestry blocks that we have and their associated lorries, do a huge amount of damage on our roads, which constantly need repair as a result. Public transport options are really either too infrequent or don't exist at all. And in many areas, particularly our really rural communities, it's not safe really to walk or cycle either to work or school. In addition, you've already heard about climate change, which is a massive issue facing all of us over the next however many years. Many of our coastal roads are subject to erosion and storm damage, which again is a major problem. Local boards and Auckland Council actually are not responsible for transport, but Auckland Transport is. And as a board, we do have some monies, but it's a relatively small amount of money that we can apply to minor improvements across the whole of our vast area. We will work to advance initiatives and interventions that improve road safety, enabling walking and cycling as transport options, that in response to our changing environment. In addition, we will explore options for improved and accelerating provision of public transport services. For example, we're asking you as part of the plan consultation that whether you would be prepared to pay a targeted rate to accelerate those provisions. Provision of park and ride facilities are a real issue, which we will hopefully be seeing at the new stations in Drury and Prioritising. And again, on the coast, we'd like to see far more made of the Pine Harbour Ferry terminal, particularly with regard to connections through bus route and also for increased parking. We're also planning to advocate for solutions in the face of our vast coastal environments. I would just really like to go back to and reiterate, in particular, the need for an upgrade to the Whitford-Maraetai Road. So there is more detail in our full plan, and I would urge you to participate and have your say as best you can. Thank you very much indeed, and I'd like now to hand over to my colleague Angela Full-James to talk about places and facilities that are fit for purpose. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Malcolm. So my outcome that I'm going to talk to is outcome 3, which is fit for purpose places and facilities. Now, this really talks to the growth that all of Auckland's having, but obviously more so for us with the Franklin area. And it's no surprise that it's been on our local board plans since we had local board plans, just by nature of our area growing so quickly. So what we're addressing here is how do we make sure that with the growth coming, that we are prepared for it and our places and our facilities can cope with that growth and are prepared. Now, it's council's responsibility to lead planning, but as a local board, we need to advocate quite strongly about having place-making based plans. And that's plans that involve community input as well. We've got some plans that have been led by community quite successfully, and we'd like to encourage that and work with those communities to see those plans become something that we can adopt. And that helps inform developers, helps inform our staff, and what is needed in the future. Often with structure plans that are done, they tend to focus on the big areas, and quite rightly so, but we need to make sure we don't forget the small settlements. Those places that have developed, you know, they may have been a holiday destination once upon a time, and you know, Clark's Beach and Beachlands comes to my mind. They are now becoming quite a bit larger, but we don't have plans in place there for how that will eventually fold out. And so it's working on those smaller ones. You've got Glenbrook as well. You know, they've got new subdivisions. It's how do they grow successfully and merge also the former communities with the new communities. So within this fit for purpose places and facilities, there's 3 objectives, and they're quite broad. We've got towns, villages and settlements are planned, which I've already touched on, but we've also got planning and advocating for investments in parks, play facilities, existing pools, so that they actually are fit for purpose in the future. And I particularly, there's some key ones that I might just draw your attention to. Kaitiakitanga Reserves Plan. We find that if we have a plan for something, and if it may not get implemented straight away, but if we have a plan in place, it makes it have an ability to attract perhaps other investment, and it brings attention to it so that it can be implemented at a later time, if not straight away. With Kaitiakitanga, it's about a visitor destination. And so how can we leverage that? And that might actually be an opportunity as a tourism offer to help local businesses as well. The second one is Pukekohe Hill Plan. How again can we make that and tell the story around that so that it has a narrative that makes it a destination in its own right as well. It's a wonderful asset to the Pukekohe area. And the third one is Beach and Maraetai Community Hub feasibility. We'd like to have a look at that. We know that the population has grown substantially to the point where it's triggered a look at providing a community-based small community civic centre and resource there. So we know that the population is at that point where it's time to take a look at that, and so that is something the plan addresses as well. Things that I'm particularly interested in, apart from all of those, is that service hub, to investigate that. But also I think, you know, recognising that our communities do have some of the answers or do have some great ideas at how they see their settlements evolving. So it's about empowering them and working alongside them to actually get those plans in places so that it can inform development, it can inform investment, it can inform our council colleagues going forward. So again, I just want to encourage you to make a submission. It's been reiterated that it might be things that you say, I support that, I want that to stay in the plan. Don't forget to say those things, as well as you might have ideas on how to enhance something that's there, improve it, or perhaps there's something that you think isn't a high priority and you want to make sure we understand that. So please, you know, do have a say, encourage others to have a say as well. By you telling us what is a priority, that helps us to do our job in a more meaningful way. So encourage that. Thank you. So now I think we've got Ellen who's going to talk about outcome 4. Thanks.
Just checking to see where Helen Cole is.
Thanks, Angela. Sorry, my computer's not working 100%. Sorry. Let's go again. Our environment, as we know, all the things we do affect the environment. You know, we've got 2 coastlines that are differing, have differing effects. On the east, we've experienced extreme drought this year, and of course that's affecting our storage in the hanuas. Climate change also has an effect on our indigenous animals, plants, ecosystems, and of course coastal inundation. Increased urbanisation also will have an effect on our ecosystems and threat our environment resilience. We need to look at our balancing protection of our natural environment with our needs for our industries going forward and jobs. I'm part of the Manukau Harbour Forum and part of the board, one of 9 boards. I would like to see that grow and have more funding, especially from the governing body as we go forward. So that's really important, I think, because, you know, it's the forgotten harbour. And also, I think one of the things we forget is we have boundaries with our local 3 neighbouring local boards where rivers cross over, but we don't actually work together. And I'd like to see us work more closely with those 3 other boards, Howard, Manurewa and Papakura, going forward. 3 initiatives I think that we've actually really taken on board over the last few years is actually our bait and trap days, where we get the community to come in and we supply them with traps and a bit of bait, and they go out and do all their trapping and controlling pests. And which we've seen an increase in bird life. I also like to see, I support the supporting of our land care groups, which we have over the last 6 years, and growing their things and helping them grow the work that they do. And I think one of the other important things is the Waiaku Zero Waste, which, you know, has a record of about 70% of recycling the products that come into it. So yeah, it's great to see all those things. So I'll just hand over to Logan now.
Kia ora koutou. So I'm talking about outcome 5, which is cultural heritage and Māori identity as expressed in our communities. So Franklin has an incredibly rich cultural history, and it is important that we respect and preserve this within our ever-changing district. So an example of this is the electrification of Papakura to Pukekohe. So the current Pukekohe train station will be redeveloped. So our role there in terms of outcome 5 is to advocate for the original train station to not be demolished, which would mean losing over 100 years of history, but somehow move it and preserve it. So Māori are the second largest ethnic group in the district, and Franklin now has the 6th largest Māori population in Auckland. There are mana whenua with significant interest in Franklin. They are Ngāti Whātua, Waiohua Tāmaki, Maru Tuahu, and Waikato Tainui. The telling of stories of our history is consistently important with the likes of our proposed Hunua Trail and its significance to Māori along with the tourism opportunities there. The Awaroa Portage and Waiuku and the restoration of the Manukau Harbour, which was mentioned by Alan earlier. We do have some challenges. Community and council resources will be limited thanks to COVID-19, and that is why it is so important with these limited resources that we make the right decisions as a board, and we can only do that with your feedback. As Andy likes to say, silence is not helpful, and so we really encourage you to give feedback. I think one that hasn't been mentioned that is yet is going, you can hop on the Franklin Local Board Facebook page and comment on our post. That feedback can be, it is informal feedback, but make sure when you're commenting that you use the hashtag Lovelocal for it to be recorded. So awesome, thank you. Ngā mihi, kia koutou, kia ora. I'll now hand over to Sharlene.
Hi everyone, I'm here to talk about outcome 6, a sense of belonging and strong community participation. I'm sure you all agree Auckland's growing pretty quickly and we're finding some real challenges at local community level for us as a local board. For example, how do we ensure that we have fair and equitable access to council services, including arts, library and event services and facilities? In places like Glenbrook, Clark's Beach and new subdivisions popping up everywhere, how do we ensure people in the newly developed parts of the community connect with established communities? Our trail initiative have been hugely successful and widely utilised by many in our community, none more so than in Waiuku. These are amazing amenities for walkers and cyclists, but these new trails are very costly to produce. How do we fund them going forward and how do we keep them the required maintenance into the future? Money's tight, obviously, particularly in a post-COVID economy. How do we progress in some projects this term and how do we gauge which is most important to our communities? This is where your input and feedback is really important to us. We've got some great ideas for how we can address some of these challenges. We think we could possibly focus support for community-led projects by partnering with mana whenua, establish local service agencies, businesses and business associations, resident associations to deliver community wellbeing programs, events and projects. We hope to tell our stories through new facilities and renewals, delivering a valuable place connection. We've done that a bit in the last term, installing murals as part of the toilet upgrades like the Constable Road toilet in the Kentish car park or the environmental message on the Karitahi toilet block. Pushing for improved connectivity and access to Wi-Fi, including through our rural halls. We hope this will help our more isolated communities access council-provided digital exhibitions, library services and online events, as well as supporting halls as community hubs. As Angela touched on earlier, at Beachlands, there's no village, high school or suitable community centre or base for community or local welfare activity, nor are there sufficient public transport connections to help our youth access existing public facilities in Hawako Pakaringa. The board will be advocating for a solution to lack of this community. Arts and Social Service Hub will investigate options for improved social and civic service provisions to Beachlands, Maraetai and our Wairoa subdivision community. We're asking as part of this consultation how people feel about targeted rates to deliver trails. This community has an opportunity to escalate the delivery of local trail projects as our amenities if they are important enough to pay a bit more for their through rates. We're testing this notion, and if there is interest in principle, we will of course come back to the specific communities with options to inform a final decision on this. One of the initiatives under Outcome 6, really important to me, is partnering with the community groups like libraries, rural halls, communities to deliver events, arts, activities, programs in our rural villages and settlements. This initiative really resonates with me because my ward of Waiuku is so vast and it's so important for there to be connectivity. We have such a diverse range of clubs, groups and individuals that proudly showcase our uniqueness through many activities. Through our halls, these groups have a place to meet, connect and bind as a community. We deliver large and small events that support local economic development and showcase unique businesses, art and community group activities. There's more detail in this full plan. I would really urge those participating or listening today to have a look at the full plan and submit your thoughts and get your friends to have a look too. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharlene, and thanks to everyone for the chat about our 6 outcomes. What we're going to do now is just get Angela just to talk about the COVID-19 response and what that has meant to Auckland Council. So, Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Well, it certainly has floored the world, and you know, for some people it's affected them quite profoundly in a negative way, but also I think we can just recognise too there's been some positives out of this as well. So when we developed this plan, it was back in January, February, a different time and a different environment, and so now what we need to do is just put that lens over our plan and say, have we got things in there that helps with our recovery? So we want to hear from you about ideas you might have, particularly in those outcomes. Is there particular ones that you think we should really prioritise that would help in a post-COVID environment? And we're thinking particularly around that economic development, you know, creating jobs, getting people back on their feet. So there may be a social aspect to it as well. There are some specifics we could go down in terms of that economic development. You know, we do have amazing opportunity with our Hanua Trail and also with the GVR as well. So we've got 2 wonderful tourism products that we could really develop. So let's hear from you on what you think about that and some of the things that we've identified in the plan. But it's certainly a different time, and I think we need to think differently. And you know, Sharlene talked on connectivity. Well, you know, we certainly learnt during the lockdown how important that was, that we were able to connect with people through this medium that we're now presenting today. So that's been a positive. You know, we probably wouldn't have done a webinar if COVID hadn't happened and we hadn't had a lockdown. We've all learned to do things in a new and different way. And so that's hopefully we can capture some of that in our plan. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Angela. So Sharlene just touched on it briefly, and she'll get another chance to talk on it again shortly. But targeted rates are one way to enable us to look at things. So I'll just ask Lance to quickly chat about public transport services and targeted rates.
Thanks, Andy. Now, we know that public transport is a high priority across Franklin. The board has a limited role when it comes to this. Auckland Transport controls the delivery of the public transport services. Now, the board's role is to advocate on behalf of the community. We want to find out if there's an appetite for a targeted rate to fund localised public transport. We know that up in Rodney, they put in a targeted rate to get some bus routes that wouldn't otherwise have been provided by Auckland Transport. So we want to know if people in Franklin are interested in the same thing. If the community is interested, this gives us the mandate to investigate a targeted rate. Also interested to hear your ideas about what is needed in terms of public transport. So please be specific as possible. For example, don't just say we want more ferries. Tell us exactly what this means. Is it a weekend ferry that you feel we need, or just commuter ferries, or more capacity, for example? I'll hand it back to you. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Lance. And Sharlene, you can carry on from where you were before.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, so as I mentioned briefly in my summary of Outcome 6, we've heard very clearly from communities that there is a strong interest in trails that offer local recreational opportunities and that connect different parts of our neighbourhoods beyond footpaths and roads. We have an amazing example of this underway in Waiuku, the local group working through Auckland Council to deliver a great trail network that will be enjoyed by the Waiuku community and visitors for generations to come. All our communities across our vast local board area have shown support for this sort of initiative, and we just don't have the resources to support each and every one. The cost isn't just about building the trail, it's about the maintaining the network for future generations to come. We know that demand is there, and if we can continue to develop and build paths and trails one by one over decades. There is, however, another option, which is for those communities that will benefit the most from these resources to directly fund the delivery and contribute to the ongoing maintenance. For example, in Waiuku, the board have invested over $300,000 to date in the development of the trails in partnership with the Waiuku Trails Committee and the concept plan for the Pōhutukawa Coast, which has been allocated $300,000 as well. We also have the plans for the Waipa Clark's Beach underway, a plan to connect Pukekohe and Pairata, and a plan being developed by the community to get around the Clevedon Village. All of these existing plans need more funding to be advanced, and we are unlikely to be in a position to progress any new plans without some new revenue streams. We want to know if local communities will be prepared to pay a targeted rate if it meant that the trails could be delivered in local communities. If we find that communities want this option or would like to hear more, we would ask staff to investigate and come back to the community with much more detail as to how much this would cost and for how long it would go on for. We've asked this as part of the consultation material and look forward to the public feedback to inform if this is something we should really be pursuing. So I'm really looking forward to your feedback, everyone. So thanks, Andy, back to you.
Thanks, Sharlene. So we've got 3 questions, 2 from the same person and 1 from someone else. So they're all transport related. So I'm going to take the opportunity to try and answer them for you and encourage people to send in some questions if you've got some there. Look, the first question was in regards to Bombay and footpaths, and generally footpaths are created when areas subdivide. But if you think there are footpaths that are missing, that aren't going to be in areas of subdivision or development, and they are needed for safety or anything, please put them in your feedback, because we are able to either advocate to Auckland Transport or we're able to apply what we have in terms of a transport capital fund. But this financial year is slightly problematic with that, but we should be okay for next financial year, hopefully. And if we deem it a priority, we can have those footpaths put in and pay for it ourselves out of our transport capital fund. The second one is in regards to the roading quality. And look, as Malcolm sort of commented before, you know, we are purely advocates in terms of this to Auckland Transport, the roading authority. You know, we're well aware of the issues in regards to our rural roads now being really stretched with volumes, the heavy traffic, and the impact that's having on them. So it's a constant area of advocacy for us. You know, it's we do need support of people reporting things to Auckland Transport, but also just telling us how important it is. Certainly having roads that are fit for purpose, as I think Malcolm referred to, is very important. And then just in terms of that, the third question was in regards to the Bombay Junction and all that happens at around the highway and Mill Road at Bombay. So yes, it is a live area of advocacy for us with NZTA and Auckland Transport. We're also doing quite a bit of work with private landowners to try and get the the roundabout built up there, out of our sort of area of decision making and influence, really. But a lot of work been done there, because we understand the issues that exist. So transport is one of our big ones, and one where we've had some success. So really do want support from people, so that we have some, I guess, a strong mandate to go to, those who are the decision makers. So really do welcome your support in those respects. So please fire in some more questions if you've got them. Not sure if anyone's got anything else to add. So from around the board, if they've got anything to add on any of those subjects or anything they've heard today. Just help, Angela. Sorry, I didn't see you.
It's okay. It's a bit tricky in this medium, but yeah, something that we have touched on before, and it's becoming more and more a topic for people to consider, is climate change and what that means. And we have talked about that a little bit tonight, but I just thought we had this opportunity maybe just to touch on that as well. And two coastlines, west coast and an east coast, and then we've got this massive beautiful Manukau harbour. It's a lot to cover. It's a lot of coastline, and whenever there's a storm, we tend to feel the brunt of that. So we really need some support to advocate that we work with the governing body, we work with other agencies to work out what are the assets that we really need to protect and look after, and how do we go forward with this climate change issue with us. It's not going to go away, and there's also some work being done with the council. And so just thought I'd fill in the gap there while we're waiting for a question. Just remember that, yeah, climate change is there in the plan. Let's have a look at that.
Thank you, Angela. So, Logan, we've had a question well, firstly, the first bit is what work has been done with swimming pools, and that falls under our facilities, making sure we've got facilities that are fit for purpose and for now and looking at the future. But there's one that's specific activities that the board is doing for rangatahi. So, Logan, you're a young person.
Great observation. So in terms of our rangatahi in the Franklin Local Board area, one of our really cool programs that we have that we support is Te Ara Rangatahi, which is based in Waiuku. And that is about it's not some people think it's specifically targeted at Māori. It's not. They take all young people, and it's basically about getting them into areas where they can learn, helping them with the trades, giving them that kind of direction, helping them find out about themselves, and that's something we want to work really closely on them with. And we also have the Franklin Youth Advisory Board. So these guys are from Waiuku through Pukekohe all the way up to Beachlands and Maraetai, and they come together regularly. They have meetings, they run events, and they kind of help to provide a direction for us with youth. At the moment, they're working really hard on the local board plan with us. So I've been meeting with them regularly, and they're going out to all the schools. They've got a really good presence on social media and trying to find out what our youth want. And at the moment, it's actually really surprising. So out of our 6 outcomes, the ones that score really highly are, well, it's not surprising. I guess transport was really up there, and so was environment. So those were the two really important, most common themes that were important to some of our youth at the Franklin Youth Advisory Board table anyway. So it's just working with them, finding out what we need, and getting their feedback as well.
Thank you, Logan. Anyone got anything else they want to add to that from the board? No, we've had another question in interested in environmental projects, and just a question: is the government funding any big ones in the local board area? Any big ideas like pest-free zones? So Alan Cole might be able to chip in.
No, they're not, but we have been supporting Andrew Sinclair with his Whakapoko Land Care Group and his aim for 2050 pest-free across Franklin, and make basically from coast to coast pest-free. So then we've got like a border, and there's work I know in the Whitu Peninsula as well about that as well, making the Whitu Peninsula, bringing it down and putting a barrier across. So yeah, it's a pity we didn't get any funding from that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Quite all right. Any addition from anyone out there? There are quite a few little initiatives that we, with the riparian planting and trying to improve the water quality, with particularly our two most degraded streams, I guess, which are the Whangamari and the Mauku. And we're also looking to collaborate with the Papakura and Manorewa local boards in regards to the Papakura stream, which starts in Franklin and is in pretty good nick, and then degrades as it heads through urban areas, so pretty keen to do that. We have a question: how does the board make sure all communities get the same support? Any takers out there for that? It is a tricky one, because equity is something that is very hard to achieve, and we, with our budgets and our constraints, we really have to do it on a priorities basis, which is important. Why we hear from you as to what the priorities are. But in saying that, we try and involve ourselves across the community to understand what is going on. So we do what we can and try and make sure that we spread things fairly well, but on a needs basis. And what is the plan to support the arts? We have great Franklin arts. Malcolm, you wanting to do that?
No, I was wanting to talk about No, I wanted to talk about how to ensure that each community gets the same support. What I would say is that all three subdivisions, the elected members are very passionate in support for their own communities, and that's really how we ensure equity in that particular area. I would have thought Angela's the one to talk about our arts, quite frankly.
Well, I was surprised when I saw me on the conversation bar, to be fair, with your name beside it. But Angela.
Thanks, guys. I was also just going to add on the equity thing. Often you look at a board plan and it doesn't get down into the detail of project line by line. We actually do a work program that falls out of a local board plan, a 3-year plan. So we do an annual work program. And what you don't see in our plan is things called renewals. So playgrounds, for instance, may come up and there might be a renewal on that playground. That means that there will be a shiny new playground in your area, but it may not jump out in the local board plan. So as your elected members, we tried to make sure that there is that equity right across Franklin, which is quite a challenge because of the number of communities and the different sizes of them and the different places and environments of them. But that's what your elected members do, and I think generally we are doing quite a good job in that space of making sure, and I think you'll see, I feel in this particular plan we've achieved that. Just talking about arts, we've got an arts broker, which we've identified again that we want to carry through that role. So tell us what you think about that. We have seen in the last term that's been very successful in helping work with artists and to get their work out there, and it's created 2 arts trails which attract a lot of people from outside our area, which has an on-trickle effect of economic development. So tell us about that, what you think there. And of course we've got our amazing Franklin the Centre, the art gallery there, which has the community and the larger size gallery as well, and numerous workshops too, which I believe Amanda is participating in one of those workshops. So yeah, give us the feedback on that. It's a very important area, and particularly, you know, post-COVID, it might become even more valuable to you. Tell us about it.
Thanks, Angela. So just a couple of questions have come in on the transport issue, and one in regards to advocacy in regards to narrow bridges, and also about what we spend our transport funding on. So Malcolm, you want to pick up on those?
Yeah, more than happy to, Andy. Thank you. With regard to bridges, they are a real issue, particularly you know, earlier I referred to the fact that heavy haulage, in particular, both through quarries and from our logging trucks, is a real issue. But the bridges are as well, and we constantly advocate for change there. I mean, we have one classic example, the Mangamangaroa Gorge, where there's such a badly aligned bridge that it really causes frequent accidents, and that in many ways is probably the main one as far as we are concerned. But there are several others in the Clevedon and Brookby area where the bridges really were more than wide enough probably 50 years ago, but currently now are not. So again, that's constant advocacy on our part to try and resolve those issues. And then there's another question, what does the board spend its transport funding on? Well, that again is something, we don't have a huge amount of money, but what we do have, we try and spread across the whole region of Franklin. But certainly in recent times, I can speak for the Wairoa subdivision, we've really been quite successful in the Beachlands area in getting a lot of curb and channel put in place where it didn't previously exist. So it's issues like that, it's local issues like that particular fund that we've got is actually intended for. Thank you.
Okay, so we've had another question in regards to the Hunua Trail. So Angela.
Thanks, Andy. So the Hunua Trail is a trail that is part of the New Zealand cycle network, and it is not launched yet. It's anticipated to be launched hopefully towards the end of the year or the summertime. It's about 45 kilometres from Kaiawa through to Clevedon, and it predominantly uses the regional park, the Hunua Regional Park and water care service lanes or roads. So it's pretty much formed, and it goes has quite some steep inclines, but generally it's a very picturesque trail to do, and skims past one of the reservoirs there as well. The opportunity with Hunua Trail is the economic one, and the ability to enjoy obviously recreation, but connect in with that New Zealand cycle trail, which we see as also being a walkable trail as well. But that economic benefit could be bike hire, it could be accommodation, it could be services all around that. And we're working in with our friends at Hauraki District Council as well to make sure that it's a great experience for those that are coming from the south into Auckland, which we don't have that connection currently. So that's where it's really exciting.
Thank you, Angela. So we've just got a question here in regards to where is the proposed upgrade of the Clarks Beach skate park and reserve at. So Alan Cole.
Thanks, Andy. So at this stage, that's been delayed because of COVID-19 funding. It was one of the new renewal projects of many across Franklin that we've had to push out because of funding restrictions. But the good news is there is actually the concept planning, etc., for the layout where they will actually be put on the park going forward, which is the skate park, the playground, and the new toilet block. That work will be continuing. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And another question in regards to the amount of housing that is coming in the development within the area. and what's the board doing about the planning for those facilities? Amanda?
Thank you. I think one of the most important things that we can do is future-proof. And that is something that we do ask our team to look at every time there is a development happening. Part of the land is put aside, be it for parks or a future community facility. So we are very interested in making sure that we future-proof all the new developments that are happening around as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. And following on from that, there's a bit of a question about whether council will consider partnerships and different ways of doing things. And I'm happy to answer that in that, look, I think if there's one thing that COVID has taught us is that we need to look at how we do things differently, but everything has to be able to stack up. And so it has to be able to be financially appropriate. And so, yeah, we are, but in the appropriate time and manner. Right, have we got any more questions out there?
Another Auckland Transport question, which I'm happy to answer. I think the point about that is it's really about all the members of the board being locally vigilant and responding to members of the community as they identify particular issues in different areas. Certainly, I find I spend quite a lot of time following up on those things. It's not easy because, again, Auckland Transport is actually the body that is responsible and not this local board. But we do have a liaison person that we can work with, and he's very good at getting back to us and also opening up avenues into Auckland Transport itself. In the last board, we actually met with the executive leadership team as well at Auckland Transport, and that was very helpful. It's good to be able to pick up the phone or send an email to a named person in AT to say, look, there really is a particular issue. One that we've got at the moment, and I don't know where this question has come from, but it's certainly Ponga Road, which at the moment is in a very, very poor state after a huge amount of rainfall has washed out a lot of the road. That's something that we're jumping up and down about, and I'm pleased to say we are getting action on that one. So it really is, as I say, very much about individual members being vigilant and responding to local needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. And so, look, we've got no more questions come through. And and if there are some that pop up afterwards, we will get back to you with those answers. I just want to thank everyone for taking part. The people out there, and I have no idea how many are out there, but you know, I appreciate you taking the time to come in on our very first webinar. So it's been an experience, and I think an enjoyable one. So thank you to the staff for helping out, and everyone. Look, there's plenty of ways for you to give your feedback, and it's incredibly important. You can see at AK Have Your Say /Lovelocal. You need to register, which is a one-off simple process. You can go to the Facebook page, as Logan, our resident young person, reminded us before. You've got to use the hashtag Lovelocal, though. And for those who, a bit like me, probably like paper and things, you can come to the libraries or to the local board offices or the service centres and fill out paper forms. You've got until the 13th of August to do that. So please give us your thoughts. Look, no idea is a bad idea, and so throw it in the mix and let us consider it. But we really need to know what you think of our priorities, whether we're on the right track, whether you agree, equally as important. So look, I hope you have everyone has a safe rest of the evening. Enjoy the rest of the week, and thank you all very much for being part of this. We will have this up on the website at some stage in the not too distant future. So thank you very much, and Paul Marie.